Okay. So I will just quickly say what we're doing here, and then Brett is actually going to give us. He's going to read your both of your bios, and he's going to start by asking you some questions. So I would like to formally welcome Christopher Oriani, 2016 graduate. I don't want to say how many years he was here. It might have been more than four. Um, and Yolanda's son, who graduated in 2013, and they happened to cross over by 1 or 2 years.
I think definitely two.
Too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two, yeah.
Um,
I see Chris a lot, so yeah.
so they're both doing completely different things with their lives now after graduation, and I'm really excited to hear about both, like kind of what your perceptions are about SUNY Oneonta, 8 or 6 years later, and also just hear about what you're doing in your careers right now and how your education here impacted you in surprising ways and maybe not so surprising ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Brett to read your bios and then start asking you some questions. And we've got about like until about 8 o'clock. And Brett, I think while you're asking questions, direct them. Make sure you're directing to one individual or another as you go. So Brett is you are you're on the
On the
e-board of the drum line,
Yeah.
taking private lessons on drum set and in percussion. And you're what year are you? Junior?
Junior, first semester junior.
First semester junior. And what is your position on e-board?
Currently, it's public relations and equipment manager.
Okay, but probably soon to be president.
Just student president, because next semester I'll be the only member that's not new.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so go ahead and introduce our two guests, and then go ahead with your questions.
All right, so first we have. I have to start here. So Yolanda, am I pronouncing that right? Yolanda's son.
Yeah,
Yolanda's
absolutely
son-
correct.
Right, thanks. A native of Hong Kong, she's an educator, musician, and outdoor guide. While in SUNY Oneonta, she majored in music industry with minors in audio production and outdoor leadership. After graduating in 2013, she spent 3 years working in the music industries of New York City and Hong Kong. She spent the next 6 years working in the outdoor industry as an educator and program director. She currently divides her time between helping out and help. Sorry, I lost for a second. Helping out music organizations and working as an education consultant while pursuing a Master of Education at the University of Hong Kong. Chris Oriani received his Bachelor of Art degree in music in 2016 from SUNY Oneonta. During his time at Oneonta, Chris was an active member in several ensembles, school musicals, and the activities councils and the Dragon Rolls drumline. Chris also directed a student-run percussion ensemble in Dr. Okada's place during a sabbatical. Upon graduating, Chris continued his education at SUNY Freedom, earning a bachelor's of music in music education and a master's of music in percussion performance. Chris now has the pleasure of teaching many different instruments as the elementary band director for the Katona Lewisboro School District in Westchester County, New York. Let's start. I guess we'll start. Chris, Westchester. I'm from Long Island, so
Gotcha.
Westchester's kind of close. So what's it like teaching there?
First I'll say I love my job. It's fantastic. It is very different than some other schools I've done observations in, student teaching in. Like the economic status of Westchester is pretty high. So certain experiences students have is different than what I'm used to. For example, like all my students, they all are required to rent their instrument, and with the exception of a few that we do have sponsors for that get instruments, that's not an issue at all. Whereas I've been in rural Western New York where they don't expect families to pay for any sort of thing. So it's culturally very, very different than some of the other teaching experiences I've had. Overall, I absolutely love it. I do like the Westchester area. I don't like my commute because don't live quite down there. probably won't. It's a little too expensive for me, but you get used to it. So yeah, Westchester is very nice.
Is that been how far of a commute is it for you?
So I teach in 3 different schools, so it's between 40 and 55 minutes, depending on the school and traffic and all that. So
I think what else to ask? I'm just looking at the question. Nice. Just one second, I'm just reading. Actually, I asked Chris one more question. You said you were in the drum line. Were you ever on? How I always wondered what the drum line was like years ago before I was here.
I played different roles. I think I was vice president at one point. Yeah, that sounds, yeah, vice president at one point. Maybe equipment something at some point too. I'm not sure, but I was on the board at one point. I think I did drumline my first 4 years there. I think it's actually how, if I'm recalling correctly, it's a little while ago. I did drumline before I knew Julie, and that's how I ended up starting to take percussion lessons and things like that, because I didn't know that was even an option. I went to a good old Club Expo and saw the drum line, and so Club Expo is very important because it does bring people like
The
myself.
same thing happened to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I did it for 4 of my 5 years there, and a lot of good memories, a lot of awesome events that we did over the years, and different roles. So I remember when I first came in, freshman, and I remember some of the other people like Yolanda, Eugene, Max, and then at the end, you leave as the old guy, and so it's a very different experience over the years, but it was awesome for sure.
Yeah,
I actually a fun story about drumline. I made a guest appearance years later when SUNY Fredonia came to the day of percussion at SUNY Oneonta. So those are the 2 schools I've gone to. Little bridge between the 2, and they did a volunteer. So of course, that's my Chris get up there and play. And so that was a fun revisiting and a nice connection between my 2 schools, and that was a really good experience for me for sure.
Yeah, I found out percussion lessons through drumline as well, so I know it.
I just assumed, as what I was at the time was a math education major. So a long story too, that I wouldn't be able to take, private lessons and stuff like that. And that was one of the things I loved about Oneonta, is that I was, and it changed my life because of it. I could say that very, very positively, and without a doubt, changed my life because I was able to take these lessons. I would have still played all that, but it made music much more prominent in my life, in my career, than it would have been. I'd probably be teaching math right now, and there's nothing wrong with that. My wife does that, but I definitely changed my whole outlook, and big part of the reason I ended up where I did. So,
can I pop in here? I actually think, and I definitely want to get to Yolanda soon, but I want to ask Chris to follow up on that. That I think would be really helpful or interesting for current students to kind of hear a little bit more in depth about the trajectory of the changes you went through while you were at SUNY, in terms of, I mean, I don't know if there's anybody on here that's thinking about changing their major, or has had any existential crisis about, the choices they've made. Like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. I know I did at the end of every academic year in my undergraduate degree, just wondering what it is that, do I really want to do this thing that I think that I'm doing right now? So I think it'd be really interesting to hear a little bit more in detail, like, what did you start as, and how did you actually, what was the actual trajectory through SUNY Oneonta to finding the major, and then the choices that you had to make after you left to kind of compensate for some of the things that you didn't get here, to get you where you wanted to go when you finally realized for sure that this is the thing you wanted to do. So just,
absolutely.
I know it's going to take 5 or 10 minutes to get there, and
sure.
Yolanda's going to get some equally deep questions in a minute.
Sure. So I came back in 2011 to SUNY Oneonta, and I was a adolescent math education major. So at that point in time, I was going to graduate with a bachelor's in mathematics and a bachelor's in adolescent ed, and I was hoping to minor in Spanish. So out of high school, I was going to be a math teacher, ideally middle school, who could also help ESL students with math. I just liked the language, and that's where I started off. Before college, I was always very big into music. I was band president, all that. And honestly, the reason I didn't go into music out of high school is because I was a drummer. And the thought of learning all these other instruments was terrifying. I could barely read pitch, let alone play a saxophone. So I went math because I loved math. I knew I always wanted to teach. And I knew I was going to have to check out the music building at some point, obviously. But because of drumline, I got introduced to Julie. And then I started to realize, well, I was a math major, but certain music classes, like such as lessons, were open to everybody. One of the great things about a liberal arts college is that you have those opportunities. So I started taking some music courses. I had this dream of triple majoring, which, in case anyone's wondering, you can't do it. They don't let you. So I started to do more and more music. And then I was like, I had a conversation with Julie, one of many, many, many conversations with Julie, that maybe I'd go into music performance. So I very quickly, we said, we might as well try it. I put together an audition for Potsdam and got waitlisted, and then eventually didn't get in, which wasn't really the goal with that audition. We knew it was soon. We knew there was a lot of things I needed to work on, but it was a great experience for me. So I think at that point, that semester, I switched over to a music major, so just a music degree. And then probably a year later, I was doing the thing a lot of music majors do, is freaking out about life. I thought I wanted to be this Broadway musician, which still sounds like a great job. I love playing shows. But I think the insecurity of it, especially what we've all seen in the last 2 years, not that I was expecting this, deterred me a little bit more. As much as I loved music, I switched back over to math. So I went math, music, math, and did about another, I think just a semester, maybe a year of math. And then I think I just decided I don't want to be a math teacher. I needed to love what I do. And so I switched back to music, something that the offices and all that were very helpful with that. And I'm not giving Julie nearly enough credit, because we sat down many times with paper and outlining what it would look like. Even when I was talking about math stuff, despite all the great academic advisors that are there and in the offices and stuff, Julie and I spent a lot of time on paper. Well, if you want to graduate, this is what it's going to look like. If you want to take this extra music course here, or take these ensembles. At one point there was, orchestra, concert band, jazz band, all things I've been part of at some point. This is what it's going to look like. I graduated with like 200 something credits because of that. It was quite a time. And then my last year, I switched back to music because like I said, I just decided I loved it too much. Didn't know what I was going to do job security wise. Very different path. I had some family in law enforcement, considered that. And then about 7 months before graduating, I decided I've always wanted to teach. That, as scary as it is, the thought of going back to school after spending 5 years at Oneonta, I then decided to graduate with my Bachelor of Arts in Music and then go on to SUNY Fredonia to get the education part I would need to become a music teacher. So that's where Oneonta brought me, to Fredonia. And then at Fredonia, I got a Bachelor of Music in Music Education, because there were certain deficiency I had. I will say, if you, and wonderful bass student that some of you know, Johnny Barnes, really took this to heart, that you can get good anywhere. Any of you that study with Julie know she's a great teacher. But at that point in my life, I don't think I took it as seriously as I did later on. We all grow through those things. So then when I got to Fredonia, it was now my career. It was now what I was going to do. So I filled in some of those gaps in theory and not so much history. I got to say, I learned a lot in the history courses I took at Oneonta. And the biggest thing was oral skills, which is, if you don't know, it's sight singing, ear training, things like that. That was probably the biggest deficiency I had that I had to work on. So it took me 3 years to get another bachelor's, despite having a music degree already, and then just another year to get the master's. So all that to say, never think you're stuck. I have some student debt. It is unfortunate, but it could be worse. And that's also a great thing about the SUNY system is if you are a state resident, my debt could be a lot worse than it is. So I went through 9 years of college and have about $80,000 worth of debt, which most doctors have hundreds and hundreds, as this doctor on the screen could probably share at some point. So that is my path to college, if that.
Awesome. I love it.
I have a few
Right.
questions for
Do
Yolanda.
you have some questions for Yolanda?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
What was it like? What was it like? Like, what kind of music industry work did you do in Hong Kong? What was it like?
So Hong Kong, obviously, the music industry in Hong Kong is not, I guess, not as big as it is in the US, just mainly because Hong Kong is actually, you could compare Hong Kong as basically like New York City, but with similar, we have a really big population, about 7 million, but the size is a lot smaller. So basically the industry is actually, in some way it's big, but it's also kind of small because you don't have a lot of places to go to. There's and because I already had connections in Hong Kong, so it was relatively easy for me to get into the industry compared to, for example, for me as a foreigner to enter the music industry in the US. So because I already knew some people, so when I started, it was kind of I immediately I was able to work with pretty big artists in Hong Kong. But it's sometimes it's about luck, sometimes it's about just knowing the right people. So I basically in Hong Kong I organized concerts for a few artists. So I really learned how a concert comes to life. So based on you have to talk with the artist, you need to agree on how much you're paying them. You need to talk about booking the venues, about doing the right marketing, getting the sales, talking to the right media agency so they can publish your concerts out. So it's a whole train of things you have to go through in order to sell your concert. And then on top, we were trying to live stream the concert, and that was quite a few years ago. And so live streaming wasn't as popular back then. It existed, but it wasn't as popular. So there's a whole different tech at the back that you have to figure out. And obviously, I'm not the only one doing it, but I was helping out the general manager. So I was doing everything, attending a lot of meetings with different people. And I honestly, I learned a lot from the job. I became so busy that, sometimes I don't feel like I get time off at all, and obviously the concerts happens in the evening. So you always have to be ready. And because there are so many deadlines for different things, getting up advertisements and all that, and so I was working a lot on the weekends as well. So I honestly, it was a really tough job in my opinion. It was a really intense time, but I did learn a lot, and definitely I mean, as a freshman working out, it was not an ideal job for me. But it really, back in hindsight, and I look back, it really did taught me a lot, and I'm still thankful for the lessons that I learned. And also that it's funny. So one thing I realized, I was organizing all these concerts. I think I was organizing about 4 or 5 a year, and they're all relatively big. They house about most of them house about 10,000 people. So and that's pretty much one of the biggest venues in Hong Kong. And I realized at the end, it was all the things that I did was really interesting, things that I've never done before. But then what I realized, I actually ended up, when I was looking at the people performing, I realized I realized what I truly like was I wanted to be on stage and perform like them. I was jealous of the musicians that were on stage, and I think that's when I realized that all these years that I loved music, and I thought I would enjoy being at the background more. I realized I've always really liked performing. So I think and at the end I realized that I learned enough, but it's at the end it was a bit it was a point where I was really confused because I spent 4 years in Oneonta thinking this is what I wanted to do my whole life. And then I realized it's actually not. So I fell into a little bit of a depression after that, just really figuring out what I want to do. And I think the good thing that came out of that is that I realized I do love music. And so I haven't given up on it. But obviously I still, at that point, I didn't know what to do with it because I realized I didn't want a career doing organizing concerts for people. I wanted something to do with myself. I wanted to play music on my own. But anyway, so eventually I did kind of switch careers into something else. But yeah, that was kind of what it's like working at the music industry in Hong Kong. And I still know people from the industry. I still follow what they're doing. I just don't feel like I want to be part of it too actively. I would rather play music and I think I still want to be in the industry, but maybe as a musician rather than somebody who's organizing all that at the back.
I know what you mean, because I'm in a band and I prefer that. I'm a music industry major, but I much prefer the performance side, but still studying music industry because I am fascinated by that. But I do know what you mean. Yeah, it is more fun to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, if you talk to Mike, he would agree otherwise. He absolutely loves it. And I think it's really different for everyone. And it's just really knowing what you want for yourself. And so yeah, and to be honest, after even working so long, you're still discovering different things about yourself. You still learn different things about yourself. I'm still the same person I am, when I was in Oneonta, but I'm not really anymore. So it's kind of interesting. And what do you think today is true? It might not be true, 5 years from now. So, things just kind of change and you just kind of have to, for me personally, I just kind of accept that, I keep changing and I'm at this age. And I think even 10 years from now, I'm still going to be learning about myself, understanding about myself. So it's kind of like a process. College was, the first step, opening, the world up. And then obviously now I'm in it. It's different because then you have different perceptions. Your knowledge becomes you have a lot more knowledge and you realize there's so much else, so much more you don't know. So yeah, so that's it.
It says here you're an outdoor guide. Can you clarify what that means? Because I'm not really sure what it means.
Yeah, so that means that basically I bring people out to do outdoor activities. I'm a hiking guide. I'm a kayaking guide, and I worked full time for a company for 6 years, just doing that basically. And I can add on that actually, and that actually relates to Oneonta as well. So I grew up in Hong Kong, which is like New York City basically, and I grew up playing music my whole life. And when I went to Oriani, I was exposed to a lot of things that I didn't have in Hong Kong, and one of them being nature. There are mountains in Hong Kong. It's just I never had access to them, or I never went because I didn't have friends who go there. My parents don't really go out too much, and I was mostly playing music, on all my time off, and so I didn't really get to go to nature. So one thing I really discovered in Oriani was that I realized I really like spending time in the nature. And I like it so much that I ended up getting a minor in it. You can see I have a minor in outdoor leadership. I don't think they have that anymore. I think the department got shut down or something. But anyway, I took basically all the classes I could on outdoor ed. So I went, for the first time, I went backpacking. I went and did canoeing, kayaking. First time I camped out in the snow and all that. So things that I never did in Hong Kong, and I realized I liked it so much. And actually, after that, in Hong Kong, after I realizing that I didn't quite like working in the commercial music industry so much, I decided that I would give it a go. I really like being in the outdoors, and obviously I didn't really have an experience working in the industry other than attending those classes in SUNY Oneonta. But I applied for the position anyway as a trainee with an outdoor company, and I got accepted, and I actually spent 6 years there just doing that. So that's why I said I kind of switched my careers, and so yeah, so it's something I learned. I love music, but I also have this other passion for something else, and I'm trying to balance. And I found my way, and I tried out both industries, and it feels like it's completely irrelevant, but for me personally, it's something I have to go through, because if I never went and did. If I never worked in the commercial industry of music industry, I would never know what I missed out, or I would regret that I never tried it. And it's the same thing for being in the outdoors. If I never went and did that 6 years in the company that I did, I would have felt like, I've always wanted to do this, but I never got a chance to.
That's, the nature here is great. So I know what you mean on that.
Yeah, it's
There's no question. I'm actually thinking of going into the audio production minor. So what is that one like? I think now it's called audio arts, right?
I think it was still called audio arts. Maybe I just named it wrong. So I think the thing that got me into it was that because in Orianta, I had you get to have basically you can pick whatever classes you want, right, as long as it's like a sign up for it. And so I just felt like there's a resource in that. Why don't I go and try it out? And I think the things you learn are actually really useful, especially if you want to go into the industry. And but I do think one thing that really taught me a lot about audio arts is while I was in Orianta, I did one of the summers I did an internship at a music studio that produced that just recorded that hired composers, and they were recording songs, film scoring, and did a lot of commercial jingles and all that. So that's where I really learned a lot about audio, just really learning how the studio works. And I do believe that a lot of things, nowadays you can learn a lot of things on your own. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Coursera, but I feel like audio arts is something that would be really nice for somebody to explain to you how it goes.
Exactly.
Even if you don't take the minor in audio arts, it doesn't hurt to actually just take that audio arts 1 and 2 and just really get to learn the basics of understanding it, because a lot of it is very technical and can be really related to physics, and that may not be something as a musician you think is going to be. It doesn't really have too much. It does have a lot to do with music, but then the working side of audio arts doesn't have a lot to do with music, just because understanding how a recording process works, what goes in and out, what goes through a processor and all that. I think it would be really nice for somebody to explain that to you, learn it in class. And I definitely think you can learn it in YouTube or something, but I felt like some things are really better learned when you actually get somebody to teach you. You can learn how to play the drums with YouTube videos, but it's not going to be very helpful because you don't get personalized instructions like you do with an instructor. So,
I mean, because I'm last semester I took audio arts 1, so I'm taking audio arts 2 probably next semester.
Yeah, it's actually, but you have, I don't know how much time you have. Oh, you have 2 more. So yeah, you do have time because you have to take all the way 1 to 4, and then I think you have to take one of those physics classes on the side, and I think that's pretty much it. I don't think I'm not sure. Oh no, you have to do some TA hours, I think, to help people out in the studio, I think. Yeah.
I'll say one of my biggest regrets, like I said, 9 straight years of essentially off and on music school, didn't take a single audio class. And, as a music teacher, people just assume you have that knowledge. And it's one thing I regret not utilizing. With all the courses I've taken over the years, how did I not manage to take an audio class? So I would tell anybody, you can get that opportunity. Definitely worth it.
And then definitely, especially if you like playing music, having that ability to know how to record stuff is going to be really helpful. How like I don't touch the piano a lot these days, but I started playing now, and I at least I know how to record stuff, and I know how to. So I feel like I it's not just playing. I can do something with my work, and it's something that it's like riding a bicycle, right? You don't ride it every day, but if you do need to ride one, you know how to do it, that kind of thing. Well, obviously you can be a very professional rider, but it's just having that skill that you have that, doesn't go away. It's nice to have it.
I just have another question for Chris. This is actually a problem that I'm currently, except I'm sort of running into, so I'm trying to find ways to fix how, because it says you were in multiple ensembles. How did you manage your time with that?
Not as well as I could have, I'll tell you that first. I mean, I can't even tell you the number of times that Julie expressed, the importance of time management and all that. And to this day, I don't care what your major is, what college you go to, that is what you need. Time management skills, for sure. How did I I think I loved it so much that running from here to there all the time that part at least didn't bother me. Um, I will say there are things that definitely we could have prepared. I could have prepared more than I did, and that's something that I valued more and more as I got older and older, and not letting. I think I would say I would err towards doing less at a higher level, performance wise, at least. You know, when you give that commitment to something, you want to make sure you're able to keep up. Now, if you can find the way to keep up with all those things, that's great. You know, and I also had, based on my
Sorry about the
strong,
noise. Someone's
that's okay. Based on the like the experience I had coming in and some of the pieces we were playing, I was fortunate that there were some pieces I didn't have to go and practice, you know, 10 hours in the practice room each week. You know, a lot of the drum line stuff I could play. So I think it's important knowing where you're at too. The stuff I really had to practice for was percussion ensemble pieces and lessons, whereas I didn't have to do as much for just things like drumline. So yeah, I think it's you got to really know what you can do, and with anything, the more time you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. I loved playing in the jazz big band with Art. I would say I could have gotten a lot more out of that with doing listening and studying the music that we did. In my master's degree, I ended up doing some jazz vibraphone, and I realized I've played so many pieces that I know nothing about. So I think you have to also know what you're trying to get out of it. If you just want to play and that's your goal is to play, make music, that's one goal to have. But if you want to do something like jazz band because you want to understand jazz music and the history of it and the culture of it, that's a different sort of time commitment. So I think it's also important to realize what you're trying to get out of each of those ensembles.
I think what else? I'm like running out of questions, right? The other question is, what was it like running a sabbatical? Because you said you ran a sabbatical in place of Julie.
Just an ensemble. I definitely was not Julie at all. No, a few of us got together, and I don't know how I ended up being the one to run it. There's really quite a few of us that were involved. But Julie, I probably made myself. I was like, I'm going to do this. So I did. That's the kind of person I am.
Know how.
If I'm being honest, I guess that is true. So no, it was just a student run ensemble, and I believe Pignano checked in on us, make sure we weren't just putting anything out there, and that was a great experience. So that was just something I wanted to do. It wasn't like an official class; it was like a club kind of thing. So there were, you know, I wasn't grading anybody, or it wasn't on like your schedule necessarily. I don't think. I had to, again, it was a while ago, but I knew there was enough of us that wanted it, and I wanted it, and I definitely jumped on the opportunity to do some conducting and directing, which now I do every day. So that's cool. Very different material, but I think it happened because we took the initiative to make it happen. And at the time, there wasn't somebody that was in Julie's place, so we wanted to keep whatever we could going without her. Because I know you've taken one sense and that you have had somebody come in for that, so which is great, which is fantastic. But that time that didn't happen, so I saw an opportunity, and I think we had some fun. It certainly would have been better if it was Julie running it, but you know, we played some fun pieces. And again, what is your goal out of it? You know, we got to make music in that percussion ensemble setting, which is a unique setting for sure. So.
Nice. I think I'm out of questions, so I guess to say, why should I think of where does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to open the floor if anybody. I know Dr. Nepke is on the Zoom now. She might have some questions for you. But if anybody, we've got 2 alumni or maybe 3 on the Zoom and a couple of current students. Does anybody out there have questions for Chris or Yolanda?
I have a question.
Hi, Lena. Go ahead.
It's more so like generic, but I think both of you can answer it. So I'm not sure who else is a senior in the call, but do you have any advice for seniors or just college students in general, like graduating soon, like, and because like entering into like the world and stuff like that? Just like coming from Oneonta, it's generic, but I like to hear like everyone's like experience and like some of their biggest lessons they learned and like how to prepare.
Sure. I would say, not to speak for Yolanda, but I think we both had very interesting paths to get where we did to this point. And I think you need to remember that a school like Oneonta, at least for me and my experience, has exposed you to so many different things. And I think that's part of the goal, right? I think that's one of the great things, again, about being at a liberal arts school. So I think understand that, this is, you're done with college or you're done with this degree. You never know. Know that that's, like we've said earlier today, like that's the beginning. All right. So you've developed this stuff over these last 4 years, some of us 5 years, some of us 9 years, and then that might be when you're figuring it out. We all like to think we figured it out in our 4 or 5 years, 6 years of college. But it's okay to not have figured it out yet. I think would be one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd give. Because that's an awful feeling if you are going through that. I know that. Like, well, come on, I got my degree, I went through college. How do I not have it all lined up and figured out nicely? For the few of us that it does line up nicely, that's great. But I think it's just know that it's okay if it doesn't. Know that this is, again, the beginning. This is not like, oh, okay, I've done all my education, I've done all my. That's not the case. No matter what field you go into from here, what your degrees are, no, it's okay. I know that we've all got a long way to go still.
Yeah, I can add on that. Obviously, just like Chris said, obviously you're not gonna figure everything out. And obviously, yeah, I don't have everything figured out either. And when I graduated college years ago. But I think definitely one thing that I think would help you while you're still in college is that I think even thinking back then, back during my college days, and I think I do take pride in that. And I think one of the strongest emotions that one can feel is a regret. So, obviously you're only gonna be in college for once. And, I think something would help is that I still do that now. You make a list of things that you wanted to do. And there are certain things that you can only really do in college. So one of the things that I actually did doesn't have much to do with college, but I think when I graduated, I treated myself to a cross-country road trip in the US. So I'm not from the US. And obviously, I don't have that strong attachment, but I felt like, if I'm only going to come to this country, once for so long, I can travel in the US, but I'm not going to stay in the US for another 4 years unless I choose to immigrate here or move here. So I did this cross-country road trip after I graduated, and it lasted for a month. And obviously, if you're working, it's really hard for you to have a month off just doing, a road trip with friends. So I did that, and still today, to this day, it's one of the best memories that I have. And definitely, I think if there are things you want to do while in college, you should definitely spend a time. And I'm not just talking about academically, I'm talking about having fun as well. When I graduated college, one of the things that I did kind of regret was that I felt like because I focused so much on, attending classes and all that, I didn't actually ended up going out and having fun as much as I felt like I should have. That was after I graduated, and I did kind of make it up for it because I worked in New York City, and then I spent a lot more time going out, just exploring, having fun. But I do look back and I feel like, in Oneonta of the 4 years, I don't have any regrets. I fully utilized my time in college, obviously the years after, now that I'm working, there are things definitely I do regret. Sometimes I feel like I didn't spend enough time doing certain things. I felt like I didn't use my time wise enough. But I think that's one of the things that I realized I didn't make that mistake in Oneonta. I really did utilize all my time in Oneonta. And I think that's really because I knew I have limited time in the country, because I knew if I'm going to have a deadline, I would definitely try to make the best use of it. And now that I'm in Hong Kong, because I feel like I live here, I'm going to be here for quite some time. I felt like, I have time to spend, which means I sort of wasted time. And sometimes I'm really not happy about that because wasting time, it feels really bad. You feel like, you could have do so much more with time. But so it's a mentality I actually have to tell myself that I should not have regrets. So yeah, that's definitely a piece of advice I would have for you, because they all say that when you're in college, they all say that, oh, high school is great, and when you're in high school they say, like, elementary school is great, and you're gonna think back and like, oh, college is great. And so definitely don't have regrets.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So
I had
Michael has
do
a
you have
question.
Mike?
I actually have a question for both Chris and Yolanda, two separate questions. So I guess I'll go Chris first. What were some of the skills or education you felt like you needed to learn that was outside of music to do your job and your profession?
Like my current, like what I do, like being an elementary band teacher, you're saying, like what I'm doing today?
Yes.
That's very interesting, because my first full-time teaching job after my college was K through 2 general music. I'll first say that I didn't develop all the skills and knowledge of everything that you need. I think you realize when you get to a job, you learned a lot of things, but there's still a lot more you could have learned. And I think after Oneonta specifically, on a generic, like, non-emotional sense, like I had to learn how to play other instruments. I mean, pretty decent percussionist, a little bit of piano chops. I love my time with Kim Patterson. I still play light shift like once a week. So for those of you that are sick of hearing that song, I still bring it out all the time. But I knew I wanted to be a band teacher at that point, so I had to learn, and I took classes on. I've taken like an actual structured course on flute, clarinet, oboe, saxophone, trombone, tuba. Might be all of them, and then the other few I learned kind of along the way. So that, from the technical side of things, I had to learn all that. And then the biggest thing is I had to learn how to teach, but teach music. I had taken a lot of ed courses, but education is very different if you're a K through 12 classroom teacher or if you're music, which is why it's a totally different degree. I realized at Fredonia that I get into this education course. Yes, some things like ed psych and stuff, they do translate very well, but all of a sudden it's all through a very different lens of music, and it's taught very differently, because whether you're a second grade teacher or a high school calculus teacher, it's still very different from music. And that was one of the biggest things I had to develop specifically for the job I do. Knowing how to look at all this through the lens of music and through the lens of younger kids. Younger students, I originally thought always 7 through 12, and then I love where I am with 4th and 5th graders right now. And like I said, K through 2, that was I didn't prepare myself as well in college for that, because even in music, you kind of gear towards the older grades or the younger grades, depending if you want to go elementary general music or adolescent, band or chorus or orchestra kind of thing. And so that part I just didn't get. I will say Fredonia has changed their program, and regardless of your major now, you have to take a general music class at both elementary and secondary, which I actually had wished at the time I might have been like really, struggling through it and hated it, but I wish that's something I did have. So those are a couple things that I had to really dive into to be successful at the job I have now.
Awesome. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Chris. He was like a big brother to me in college. So I think everybody should always aim to have friendships like this. For those of you that aren't like older yet, we had an alumni hang the other night and we all got to see each other. So it was nice to see everyone again. Now, Yolanda, my question for you is, and I want to say everybody should also really, like, Yolanda was one of my favorite friends in college. So I just want to give them both shout outs because they're so awesome, because Yolanda inspired a lot of my international friendships that gave me a lot of perspective in life. So Yolanda, my question for you is, how do you go from navigating everyday life in the US and the way the professional business world worked here to now taking that to another nation where things might have been modified than what you had been used to for the past 4 years?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Micah. That's actually a great question. So it's interesting to talk about because international experience is, it's interesting, but it opens up you to, you know, lenses where, you know, basically I get different pairs of spectacles when I look at things, right? So I speak two languages. I grew up in a very different culture. I immerse into a different culture. So I can share that, and I try to make it short because I could talk 2 hours about this topic. So basically I didn't grow up in America, right? So before I came to the US, I already have a certain culture that I'm used to, right? So I came to the US, and I think it's definitely it's really an important part of my life because, you know, at that age, you know, when you're in your teens, when you're just, you know, when you're starting to become mature, you're starting to understand what's happening in the world, because you're not just, you know, within your own little community. You're trying to, and I think it's probably very similar to everyone. You know, you come from your town, from your high school, you come to this big place called college, and it's the same for me, except, you know, where I came from is just a little bit further away. So I think for you trying to adapt to, you know, to the college culture, for me it's not just adapting to going to college, it's also me adapting to a completely new culture, to basically not that I don't know English before. I've known English my whole life, but, you know, there's a difference because, you know, and back where I live, we don't really communicate in English. And now I go to this place, and obviously you all have to talk in English, and just understanding that difference, and the mentality of the culture, or why people behave certain way, has really broadened my horizons. And so when I went back, it's actually even more interesting because now I need to reintegrate back into an old culture. So imagine I go to this place, I change because I learned something new, but I go back to the old place hasn't changed. So it's a bit like, you know, you going back to your hometown and it feels like home, but it's different because you're not that same person anymore. So I think that actually created a certain degree of frustration for me, because then obviously the things that you knew to be normal before you came to the US, you learn a different perspective in the US, and then you go back, you start to questioning the things that happen, or the things that the things that were there in the first place. So so for example, you know, and I think a very classic example is that Hong Kong is a really compact city. So you know how, like, you know, normally if you go to a big city, people tend to be not very friendly, or mostly because you're just, you know, you're jam-packed with people, right? And you're just going about your own ways. If you go to New York City, and versus if you go to, I don't know, say like a small town, people are generally a lot friendlier. So that's kind of like an integration I have to get used to, because when you go back to that environment on where you grew up, and obviously you changing doesn't change the society, right? So you need to get used to how people treat people in your place, and you need to understand that you know, people need their space. And obviously it's very true, because, you know, if you live in such a compact city, you know, people want their own space. So people aren't as friendly, and it's not that people aren't nice, it's just that's how the way it is for society. And so I definitely I had to reintegrate back into where I came from, even though when I went back I really wanted to go back, because I miss home, and I do realize, you know, there's so many things I wanted to do back at home, because then I learned, I become someone different. I wanted to go back and, you know, experience home with a new pair of lens, you know, with a new perspective. And obviously going back, it's frustrating because you feel like things didn't change all that much, but you changed. So obviously slowly you get used to it. And I need to find my own place in the city. And so actually working in an outdoor job really helped that way, because you know, when you're out in the city, in the suburbs, you have less people, you get more space around you. People are a bit more friendlier. You're connected with like-minded individuals. So it's just about finding a community that works for you. And so I did have, that's why I really did think that, working in the outdoor industry really helped give me that piece of that peace of mind that really helped me navigate, in a new place that I used to know very well. And obviously now I've left the company, and actually I'm also, I think I'm also now reintegrating back into the city life, and I also find it difficult because of obviously COVID really didn't help make things better. The world just changed completely as a place, and so yeah, it's always about, and I think it's not that different from, I don't know, for example, for any of you guys moving to a new city in the US. I think it's pretty much the same. It's just in a different, in a different scale, and it's physically a lot further. So yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Dr. Nappy, did you have something you wanted to ask of the students? Or not students anymore, I'm sorry, or alumni. These adults.
Always a student, right? Lifelong
Yeah,
learners. Isn't that the?
Yes.
I'm just really glad to see her again. And thank you for putting this together, Julie. It's really great. And I've been having a great time listening to student comments, getting to know people. Lena's in my class now, but it's just different this way. So thank you.
Yeah, to see the face, right?
Right. So Yolanda, I'm interested in, I guess for both Yolanda and Chris, how you see the culture in which you are living, how you see it changing. What do you think it's going to do to change in the next 5 or 10 years? You came back to it and you are changed and you've noticed the difference, and Chris went to a new place and saw what was different there. But as you look around your city, both of you, what do you think will be happening to the city and therefore your life?
I'd say not just my city, but in my profession, in education and music specific. I mean, no one, this is obviously everybody, but these last 2 years have drastically changed how we perceive a lot of what we do, and how we teach it, how we receive the information, and how it's absorbed by the community. So I think we've seen a lot of this change because we had to. I think going forward in education, which I think would have happened some either way, but there's kind of been a catalyst in that you'll see a shift to more small ensembles, more rather than the traditional large band necessarily, or we try to find a place for both, because we've, out of necessity, got to experience some of these things where it's a few people instead of the traditional band setting or traditional orchestra setting in schools. And I think I think there's pros and cons to all of it. I think we've learned to utilize some resources we didn't know we had. They existed, most of them, but we didn't know how to utilize them, or that we could utilize them. And so I hope that when things go back to normal, that we don't forget about these other tools that we've discovered. Not to say we all need to stare in front of a screen. I know we all like our time away from the screens, but I hope that we use this as a positive moving forward, because I do think we've developed a lot more tools and solutions to problems we didn't know we would have. So I think that's changing, I guess, on a global level, but specifically in my field as well.
Yeah, I have a follow-up, which I hope Yolanda will also be able to address, and that is, in your current life, what do you find most personally rewarding?
I'd say playing instruments I never thought I'd know how to operate.
Right.
For example, I played saxophone for about 2 hours yesterday at home just because I felt like it. And I haven't been doing a lot of music making on my own outside of my job. And every now and then, especially as of late, I've kind of realized like I've got to do it for fun. Like I've got to do it. And I did, cliche, like I put on some videos of, sheet music that's play alongs, and just I was home by myself and I think that just reminds me like, oh, like this is great. And I would say the other thing specific to my job is, you know, I work in an elementary school, and having a little kid come up to you like, Mr. Oriani, like it's just, maybe it'll get old someday, but as of right now, every day that's rewarding to me. So of
That's great. Thank you.
course.
It's a really interesting question because so yeah, I'm talking about the city I'm living now. So the city I'm living in right now, I grew up in the city as well. So and I think well, basically Hong Kong is quite an interesting city. And if you have been following the news lately, and if you notice what's happening with Ukraine right now, you can imagine that basically 2 years ago, Hong Kong was in a similar situation, and not in the sense that, you know, we got attacked by another country, but we basically that was a very big, and I'm not sure if this is even the right place to talk about it, because, you know, it's not really related to music anymore. But is that okay? Can I? Is it okay if I go on? Okay, great.
Yes, totally fine.
Yeah, so it's yeah, because I don't even know if people want to know about it, to be honest. But yeah,
So long as you feel
yeah.
safe talking about it, if you feel safe talking about it.
No, it's yeah, I feel safe. I'm just not sure if it's like if people want to know this, because it's not really related to music anymore. But yeah, it's really interesting. So, you know, you grow up, you learn about all this stuff, and then, you know, you go to the US, you learn more things, and then you go back and realizing, you know, and you feel like, you know, the world's supposed to be improving, but, you know, you grow up and you realize sometimes it's really not the case. And I feel like, to be honest, I don't know, but I feel like in the US, I think some of you will feel the same way too. You know, sometimes things don't really become better. I mean, they do obviously at some point, but, you know, sometimes you feel like things don't get better. And I think that's the case where I'm living in my city, where it used to be a very diverse and a very accepting place normally, for basically for all kinds of voices. Now you're really limited to really just certain number of voices. You don't really, sometimes you're afraid to express your own opinion because sometimes it would cost a lot. You know, it could cost your job, it would cost friendships, it could break relationships. So it's kind of an inconvenient truth, that, you know, as you grow up, you realize, you know, sometimes it is really nice to think about the old days, because sometimes the old days really are better, because you didn't have that perception back then. You didn't know what's going on back then. And so it is true that sometimes ignorance is bliss. So basically, in very short terms, Hong Kong used to be a more democratic place, and it's really not anymore. It's very frustrating to a lot of people, because if you never had freedom, you wouldn't know what to do when you have. But if you did have freedom before and you don't have it anymore, and I think it's really relatable. Just think about, you know, how you used to be able to go out to all the places without a mask, and now you're confined to this area. There are so many talks about, you know, whether you can go out or not, whether you wear a mask or not, whether you get vaccinated or not. So yeah, so that kind of thing, and so to be honest, I have it's been quite difficult, because not only obviously, you know, personal life, you know, going through, you know, work and stuff can be frustrating, but, you know, just seeing what the society has also become frustrating. And actually, a lot of people, and I think actually including myself, a lot of people in Hong Kong have, for those who have the ability to, or basically even for those who really can't afford it, for those who really do value freedom, have chose to move away. And that actually includes myself, and I haven't done so because I'm doing a master's degree right now. But upon completing the master's degree, I would be eligible to immigrate to Canada. And so that is actually kind of like my short-term life plan, is that I will, in order to, you know, and it's really hard leaving, you know, your home, because you do love your home, but when home is not really home anymore, you know, there's really not much for you to stay for anymore, because whatever if I'm living in this place where I'm living right now, I'm just going to watch it deteriorate even more. And it's really difficult for me personally, because, you know, it's because it's really hard because I actually do love this place, and it's really difficult because when something you love it's not becoming that thing anymore, then to basically to save yourselves, or basically to in order to enjoy the things that you want to, you will have to make a sacrifice. So that for me, that entails me I'm gonna be immigrating abroad, and obviously the things I'm gonna lose are gonna be a lot. I'm losing a lot of the culture that I'm used to, and I'm going to be gaining a lot, but it's going to be losing the chances to see my parents frequently. It's going to be integrating to a new society, which I have done so because I have lived abroad before. But it's also obviously facing other challenges where I don't face in Hong Kong. So, for example, racism is an issue in Hong Kong, but let's say because in Hong Kong, 9% of the population is Asian. So people who look like me, so I don't face any troubles when I go around. I don't face the troubles that other friends that are not from Hong Kong that could face. But then if I go to a new place, and obviously I have been reading news and all that, so maybe going to Canada, being an Asian could be more difficult than being an Asian in Hong Kong, for example. So yeah, so that's life for me, and that's how I feel about my city. And as for the things that I feel rewarding, it's a really good question, because I obviously in this situation and all that, it didn't feel like I should think about life being very rewarding, because life obviously doesn't really feel a lot like that way right now. But honestly, I do feel there's always things to be grateful for and things to be to feel rewarded for. Is that obviously a lot of people have had this a lot worse than I do. Some people go to jail for expressing freedom. Some people lose their families to COVID-19. Some people lose a lot of things. They run out of money, and obviously I'm also struggling myself, but I still have a roof over my head. I am studying. I do have work. So there are a lot of things to be grateful for, and I think really something that I feel really grateful for is that and I think all of us would agree that having music in your life is whatever thing falls apart, you can always go back to music, and I think that's exactly how it is for me. That whatever happens, there's always something you can go to comfort. And some people it could be a book or something, but for us who play music, we all know that if things don't go well, you can always just go to music, and it will comfort you. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So are there any other questions from those attending? Brett?
No, I'm out of questions.
Okay. So I have two sort of fun follow-up questions, and one of them, Chris, you've kind of already answered, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So for follow-up ending questions, I would like to have each of you recount one of your favorite memories or most memorable experiences from your time in Oneonta. And then secondly, I want to know what music you are currently working on.
I'm currently working on Essential Elements number 10, number 11, number. I figured we'd ask something like this, and there are two memories that came to mind immediately. One was because of the radio today. I'm driving to work today, and the song "Get Lucky" comes on, and Mike, obviously you remember because you spearheaded it. We did this arrangement of it with "Get Lucky" and "Sail," and it brought back all the times, especially through percussion, where we took certain things and we were free to express them in ways that you might not be in other places. And like in improvisation, we've done that freedom to, especially after being in a much more conservatory style after that. Those are great memories. And the other thing Mike, I think you might have also been a part of this, was we played at the drag ball one year and DJ's equipment went out. So those of us that were there, we pretty much jammed. And to this day, it's one of my most fun musical memories because it was all unscripted. And those of us that, yeah, as Mike says, we stole the show. Everybody loved it. And, you know, there wasn't a room full of just music people, you know, there's people from all walks of life, and making music unscripted like that for enjoyment with people that you love to be around was by far one of my best memories from Oneonta. The recitals were pretty fun too, but was there another part of the question?
No, I say, but those recitals were a lot more work, right?
Yeah,
So much pain going into it.
they and
For
I
both
will,
of you.
and for you, are you kidding?
Oh my gosh, it was the joy of my life. Stop. Guiding you
Oh.
through your pain is my joy.
Pulling us through. Yeah.
You're like, what is wrong with me?
Oh.
All right, Yolanda.
Yeah, and I don't, yeah, there's a few students, but I will, to be honest, it's really hard to, you know, pinpoint like the most memorable great experience in Oneonta, because it really, when I think about it right now, it really is it's kind of like a whole package. It's really not about just this one pinpoint incident. And obviously there are a few instances where I felt like it was really great, but I think overall, personally, I did not expect the kind of growth I had in music while I was in Oneonta. When I came to Oneonta, I came for the music industry program, which is not available in Hong Kong. People don't really study the music industry in detail in Hong Kong. You study music, you go to conservatory, or you study business. And obviously, when I came, I didn't expect that. And obviously, I realized that there was a chance for me to grow musically in Oneonta, and it was the most unexpected gift that I have had in here, because Oriani is not a conservatory. People don't really come here exactly to study, to study music, like a conservator, So that was definitely the biggest surprise. I grew so much. I played several instruments and I grew in all of my instruments. And I think I had the most growth playing piano and percussion. And I think I've learned the instrument for my entire life, and it was those 4 years that I grew the most, because prior to that I was really just attending lessons, and I didn't have goals for myself. And Oneonta is the place where I realized that I can choose what I want to do in music, and then that really pushed me to become better, because I was no longer following instructions from other people. So I get to do what I want, and I think that's when you get the most motivation, because you're giving yourself that target and goal, and you're trying to you're not trying to please anyone, you're trying to please yourself, which interestingly enough you're your biggest competitor, and you're the most difficult person to please is yourself, actually. It's very interesting life. So definitely my growth in music is the biggest gift I got from Oneonta, and especially now that I'm doing a master's, and I kind of knew it back then, but I have even more appreciation for my time in Oneonta, because most of the schools, and I think it's the same. I mean, most of the schools that focus on doing research are usually really big. They have a lot of students, and the faculty are always focused on their research, right? But if you go to a college, a smaller school, where professors can spend a lot more time actually teaching, or they're valued a lot more for their teaching work, you actually get a lot more out of it. And I really do get that firsthand right now in my master's. I'm studying in the biggest and the best university in Hong Kong. We're ranked number 6 in the world, and you get professors that are great, they know a lot, but you're on your own, because there are so many students in the school, you're all pursuing different things, you don't get that personal attention. So it's, and I think it's different kinds of learning style, but overall, I think the best education is the one that is catered to you. And I think in a small school like Oneonta, you're much more likely to get that. And I think I got, it's definitely like it's one of the best value I got out of Oneonta is that I was able to really grow through all the help. And I think it's a great place because obviously it's been so many years that I actually get to talk to the professors that I, Dr. Naki and Dr. Licata that I've, and Julie, I never got a chance to, reflect and talk to you guys properly about how life has been and how much appreciation I have for Oneonta. So I definitely want to use this. I'm glad this platform brought us back together, and I definitely want to, let you know how much I'm grateful for the time I had in Oriental. And it's still impacting me a lot, even though life is different right now. But so yeah, thank you so much. And as for the music I'm working on, so it's funny. So I did talk about how, usually when I'm at the lowest, I go back to music, and that's kind of the case. I unfortunately, because to play percussion you need instruments, and obviously now that you don't, I don't go to a school, and so I don't really have access to percussion instruments, but luckily I still have my piano. And even though I don't really get to play percussion anymore, which I do love to, I still write music on my own sometimes. And I've always had different ideas I want to write about, but sometimes I don't get time to work on it, or maybe I'm just not determined to work on it. But when I do post some of my music on this little page that sometimes I go on, and so you can hear a little bit about what I write. So yeah, I'm definitely considering spending more time in music, just because I feel like that is what is good for my soul and my mind. So I definitely want to write more, just so that it's something I definitely want to work on again, because I think I did mention, after I left my job in the music industry, I realized I like being a performer so much more than working behind the scenes. So I'm working towards that. And so yeah, so that's the stuff I'm working on. If anybody wants to listen to, it's what I write.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I did not know it existed, and now I'm following you.
Thank you.
Yay. But I get to follow me back though.
Yeah, I will. I mean, yeah, I will. I don't even, you have a SoundCloud? I didn't know that.
I do. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I have
Put it in the
all
chat.
social
Now we're
medias.
yes. No,
Yeah, let's follow each other. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, let's do that.
Mhm. Awesome.
The one thing you said about like your professors, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I've been in 2 schools that I've had phenomenal, specifically percussion teachers, that were pretty accessible. But it was like a culture shock, even just going from Oneonta to Fredonia. I mean, we do take for granted, even if we say we don't, how many hours, like Julie, how many hours I spent in your office talking about things. And when you have, thousands and thousands of students, and that doesn't happen at the same level. So any current students, don't take that for granted, the accessibility you have to all your many of your professors. So don't take that for granted at all.
Yeah, I mean, I really remember, like, I think, I'm not sure Julie remembers. So I think before I had my recital, I was crying a lot because I just didn't think I was playing well, and you were just this big counselor to me, and then you were just comforting me, and then, so yeah, it's you don't really take it for granted, because you don't have just professors, not just teachers here. You have people who just help you out in life. So
I think most of us have, shed a tear or two in Julie's office at some point, right?
yeah, I guess.
I'm sure,
At some point.
Jordan, I'm sure we could all,
I do remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that I would like to stop the recording now. If nobody else that is in attendance has any questions, I'll stop the recording so that we have something formal and official and ended for the YouTube channel. Thank you, Brett, for hosting and asking some good questions at the beginning of the session. And thank you, Yolanda and Chris, for taking time out. It's awesome to see you always, and I wish that I could see you more often. I mean, I don't see either of you very often, but it's been a really long time since I've talked to Yolanda. And so I'm really excited about having you here. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we can continue informally if we wish.